Today, we are going to begin part 2 of our sermon series called Foundations. And the reason that it's called Foundations is because there are many things that you can put as your foundation, but we know truly that Christ is truly the only foundation. And so as we move forward today, I'm looking forward to continuing this series, all right? So let's see, let's go to the next one. Pop quiz time. Are you as excited as this young man is? Come on now, are you excited as a pop quiz? I have to keep you on your toes. Now he's excited, he's ready. The question is, are you? So we're gonna talk about a couple of the points from last week. Who remembers what the first takeaway was from last week? I'm gonna test you, see if you were studying throughout the week. And those online, you can chime in as well. You gonna get someone online? Okay.
Number one, this is Barbara.
Hey, Miss Barbara.
I miss you guys. I'm sorry I'm not there today.
It's okay.
The first one that I have is Jesus Christ is the only foundation that we can build upon.
Absolutely. There you go. There you go. Now we got two more. Anybody else want to chime in? And Miss Barbara, if you want to save them and give the next points, feel free to do so. Because my students here in the go ahead. Who's that? Miss Vanessa?
That's Vanessa.
Okay.
We have to count the cost.
Count the cost.
Yeah, count the cost.
Absolutely. Great. And since I'm gonna be generous, I'll go ahead and give you guys the last point. All right. That last one is the proper foundation will help you bear much fruit. Right? But Charlene said she had it. Okay. This is what we covered last week in part 1. Jesus Christ is the only foundation one can truly build upon. 2, the proper foundation may cost you certain things that the world sees as important, like we saw in the rich young ruler. And then the proper foundation will help you bear much fruit. Once you have the proper foundation, from that point going forward, you'll have exactly what you need to bear fruit for the kingdom of God. All right, this week, however, we're going to cover something a little different. So last week was building the right foundation in our faith and walk with Christ. This week, we're going to talk about building the right foundation in our relationships with people. So it's a little different, okay? We're going to cover someone that I was reading in detail about this week, a gentleman by the name of Joseph. And Joseph has a very, very important message, I believe, that that applies to a lot of people and applies to everyone, really. And we know Joseph is one of the more well-known biblical characters. We know that he was one of the 11 sons of Jacob. We know that he was from a land called Canaan. We also know, and this is very important to the story, that he was his father's favorite son. So chapters 37 through 50 of the book of Genesis covers the life of Joseph, but we're not going to go through all 13, but we are going to go in depth in a couple. All right. We're going to start with we're actually going to start with chapter 37. So let's start there. I know I have 39 on the screen, but we're going to go with 37. All right. Verse 1 says, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. So he favored Joseph. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So he was getting into it with his brothers because his father favored him over them. Verse 5, it says, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even the more. And they said unto him, here, I pray you, this is what the dream is. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaf stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf, which means basically it bowed down. So Joseph had a dream. And in the dream, they were, in the land, tilling the land. And Joseph's sheaf, everything that he had was built up. And the rest of his brother's sheaves bowed down to him. So what God was explaining to Joseph was that you're different, and I'm going to place you in a position of authority and leadership. But Joseph couldn't really understand it at that moment. So let's continue to dive into it. Verse let's drop down to verse 15. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and a man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. So he said, I'm trying to find my brothers. Where are they? Verse 17, and the man said, they are departed hence, for I have heard them say, let us go into Dothan. And Joseph went, and his brothers found them, and he found his brothers in Dothan. Verse 18, and when they saw him afar off, before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, behold, the dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say, some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. So here we see that Joseph's brothers are plotting against him to kill him because they're just jealous. They believe and know, and rightfully, that God is going to use him, that God has some plans for him, and God was speaking those plans through the dreams that he gave to Joseph. And so his brother said, you know what, we're gonna take him out. We're gonna kill him. Talk about some family drama, right? But Reuben said, no, let's not kill him. We're gonna tell the father that a wild beast came and killed him. So we're gonna take the coat of many colors that they gave him, that the father gave him. We're gonna cover it with some animal blood. We're gonna take it back to Jacob, and we're gonna tell him that's how Joseph died. But then it says they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread. They lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, his brethren, we were content. So here it is, we see Joseph was sold into slavery to someone who's going to take him to Egypt. And that's where he'll be until God has some more plans for him. I think a lot of times we take these biblical accounts for granted, and we think, oh, well, because we know how the story ends, that person wasn't afraid along the way, that it wasn't difficult for them. Joseph didn't know at the exact time when God's plan would come to pass. In fact, he knew that God was going to do something, but he didn't know exactly when. He knew the end result, but he didn't know exactly each single step along the way. You have your freedom taken away. You're taken to a new country, right, against your will. Not so they speak different languages, eat different food, different cultures, so on and so forth. You don't know how long that you're going to be there. But Joseph still had the right foundation because he still trusted God along the way. And we're going to see that in chapter 39. Turn with me to Genesis chapter 39. And when you get there, tell your neighbor, I am glad to be in the house of the Lord. There we go. Y'all quick. Those online, I'm going to trust that you are doing the same. Verse 1, chapter 39. It says, and Joseph brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guards, an Egyptian, brought him into the hands of the Ishmaelites, which brought him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. So they recognize there's something different about this man named Joseph that we brought over here. We brought him into slavery, pennies on a dollar, so to speak. And now we recognize that there's something a little different about him. Verse 5, and it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in the house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And verse 6, this is where the trouble begins, right? Verse 6, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught what he had, save the bread which he did. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, come lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master would not like that which is in my house. And he hath committed me all that he has into my hand. So he's saying, listen, he gave me everything that I have and put me in a powerful position. I'm not going to dishonor him like that. It says, there is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept anything back from me, because you are his wife. How then can I do great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her. So he's refusing to give in to the temptation to be with Potiphar's wife. Let's drop down to verse 13. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth. Then she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought an Hebrew unto us to mock us, and he came in unto me to lie with me. And I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he had left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garments by her until his Lord had come home. And she spake unto him according to those words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought us has came in to this house to mock me. Let's go to verse 20. And Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it, or the director. Verse 23, the keeper of the prison looked not at anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So here we are. Joseph refused to sleep with Potiphar's wife. She lies and says, hey, he wanted me. He tried to attack me. And guess what? That lie got Joseph put into prison. Joseph did nothing wrong, but yet he was put into prison. And there's sometimes where as Christians, we may not do anything wrong, but we'll be placed in a situation that we didn't ask for. But God is strategic. He thinks ahead and he knows all. And God was going to even use this situation right here with Joseph being put into prison, even though he didn't falsely accused, right? Didn't do anything wrong, but yet put into a prison. So imagine that. Not only you're taken into another country against your will, now you're here in a place that you're not expected to be. And then something bad happens again. You're prospering, doing well, but then you get put into prison falsely. So we're going to go to chapter 40. And we're setting the foundation for this, right? So let's go to chapter 40. We'll start with verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry against the two officers, the chief and the butler. And he put them in the ward house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season inward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to his interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked his Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his Lord's house, saying, Wherefore look so sad? So why are you looking so sad? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong unto God? Do not interpretations belong to him? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And the vine were 3 branches. And it was, though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee into thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand in the former manner which thou was his butler. So he interpreted the first dream for the butler. He's basically saying, okay, here, I know you're in prison with me now, but this dream that God gave you, this is the interpretation thereof. You'll be restored back to your position. So that takes care of the butler, right? Let's see what happens to the other gentleman. Verse 13 says, Yet within 3 days shall the Pharaoh lift up thy head and restore thee into thy place. Verse 14. It says, But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray, unto thee, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. So he's telling him, don't forget about me. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here have I done nothing that shall put me in the dungeon. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uttermost basket there was of all manner for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. Verse 18, and Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days you shall lift up, Pharaoh shall lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off of thee. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all the servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but he forgot him. One of the things that stood out to me as I was reading chapter 40, Joseph told the man that he gave a good report to, the butler, the servant, he said, don't forget about me when you get back to your position. And a lot of times, one of my prayers recently has been, God, I thank you that you haven't forgotten about me. And the reason that that's one of my prayers is because a lot of times things happen in life and we don't understand it. And we think that God somehow has overlooked what's going on, or that he has so much going on that he's forgotten. And when you pray that prayer, Lord, I thank you for not forgetting me. You're affirming your faith in God. You're affirming the fact that you can trust in him. Because that's one of the lies of the enemy, is to get you to believe God is not paying attention to you. God is not, whatever's going on with you, you lost a job, or lost a loved one, whatever situation is, things may be stagnant in a certain area of your life. The enemy wants you to think that God forgot about you. But don't fall into that trick, brethren. And one of the ways you can combat the lie of the enemy is to simply thank God that he has not forgotten about you. Amen. And that's so key. Because think about that. You're in prison. You know you didn't do anything wrong. You interpreted this dream, a positive dream, a favorable dream for one of the prisoners. And you're like, hey, look, when you out there, don't forget about me, all right? I'm still in here. Don't forget about me. And the man forgot about me. Just like people, right? But I'm glad God is not like people. And God didn't forget him. Let's go to chapter 41. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river scene 7 well-favored cows and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other cows came up after them of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other cows upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed cows did eat of the 7 well-favored and fat cows. And so Pharaoh awoke. So now Pharaoh is having dreams. Now don't let this get past you. Joseph was in prison, it looked like, for 2 years, because he didn't go on to interpret Pharaoh's dream until after that part. Verse 5, it says, and he slept and dreamed the second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up of one stalk, and rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears and blasted with east wings sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank of full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream. But there was none that could interpret it unto Pharaoh. Verse 9. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was upset with his servants and put me inward, and the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. Verse 11, and we dreamed a dream in one night, and I and he, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man according to his dream did he interpret. Verse 13, and it came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. So he's just telling what Joseph's interpretation was. Verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they said unto him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. So he changed his clothes, he got all nice. Let's go to verse 16. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. And he goes through all of everything that he had. And basically the dream was to tell them that, listen, there's going to be a great influx of cows and everything they leave with livestock, but then there's always going to be 7 years of famine as well. And so that's basically what the rest of chapter 41 goes into. And so let's skip all the way down to verse 38. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God has shown thee all of this, there is none so discreet and wise as you are. So after Joseph interpreted the dream, this is what Pharaoh was saying to him. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto my word, unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. So you're second in command. You go from a prisoner, a slave, then a prisoner. Now you're second in command. Verse 41. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bowed the knee, and he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Let's skip down to verse 46. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. So here we are. We see the process that Joseph was going through and everything that he had to experience interpreting the dreams, because guess what? Who knows? Joseph may not have risen to power to be second in command if he wasn't in prison, but he wouldn't have been in prison if he wasn't falsely accused. He wouldn't have been falsely accused if he wasn't sold into slavery. And so God was orchestrating the steps, and that's the same thing that God does with each and every one of us in principle. He orchestrates our steps. Brother Glenn shared a story last week about how he had to take off on one of the annual holy days and how that led him down the path of a successful career in a different field. But he wouldn't have been in that situation but for a decision that he made. And it's the same thing that God does with us. So let's keep moving forward. We're going to go over to, and I'm going to give a brief synopsis. So when Joseph was in power, right, second in command, after he had interpreted the dream from Pharaoh, now he's in a position where they're experiencing the famine. So the dream that God gave to Pharaoh was that there's going to be years of plenty and then years of famine. And so when the years of famine came, that's when we see that Joseph comes in and interacts with his brothers now, because Jacob told his sons, hey, go over there to Egypt, because the famine is so great, it's even reached the land of Canaan. Go over to Egypt and bring back some corn and spices and everything that we need to eat, to live. And then that's how we found out, that's how we see that Joseph interacts with the rest of his brothers. So that's basically what happens through chapter 42 through 44. So we're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 45. But I'm going to let Brother Eric read chapter 45, verse 1. Genesis chapter 45, verse 1.
Genesis 45, verse 1.
Mhm.
So then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, cried, "Is every man to go out from me?" And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren, and he wept aloud. And the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? Does my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that you sold me, for God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years has the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. So has you and go up. I got a different version.
Yeah, that's fine. It said, hasten you and go up.
Hasten you and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus said thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not.
Verse 10, read the last, verse 10 is the last.
Okay. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks and thy herds, and all that thou hast.
All right, thank you. So that was Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 10. So we see that Joseph revealed his identity to his brothers. Imagine that. There used to be a show in the late 90s, in the early 2000s. It was called Forgive or Forget. And I remember watching that show. And the basis of the show was they would bring a person on, and that person would tell all the wrong that they did, right? You know, or they would talk about how they wronged someone in some type of way. And then maybe about 20 minutes into the show, they would tell that person to get up and walk toward a door. And they would open that door. And if the person that they did wrong to, if they forgave them, they were there. And if they were not, they had to take that long walk back to the couch. All right. And I remember that show. And I remember, and that's what came to mind when I was thinking about this. So think about Joseph could have easily said, you know what? I'm gonna forget my brothers. They did me wrong. They sold me into slavery. Slavery led me into prison. So on and so forth. He could have been angry, but he didn't. He forgave. So to speak, if Joseph was on that show, he would have been at the door. When his brothers came, he would have been there. He revealed his identity. Imagine the emotions that Joseph was feeling. Because all of us have probably gotten into it with a sibling or someone in our life that we may not have a great relationship with, and we know that that person has wronged us. But none of us have been sold into slavery. None of us have been taken over to a foreign country. And Joseph's attitude was amazing. Joseph had the right foundation from the very beginning. Even though it was difficult, even in difficult situations, Joseph was still doing the right thing. He didn't give in to the temptation with Potiphar. He even did so well that even when he got to prison after being falsely accused, he still did so well. He was still put in charge even there. So brethren, ask yourself, am I doing such a great work? Am I doing so great that people can say, that person's God, he's with the God of Daniel? Mm-hmm. Yep, Vanessa's God, yep, he's good. Are you standing out like Joseph was? Do you have the right foundation so that when you are placed in a difficult situation, you do know how to carry yourself and you do know how to respond? Because we see that's what Joseph did right here, and he didn't hold a grudge. Let's continue to read on. Let's jump over to Genesis chapter 50. So I'm gonna give you another brief synopsis for the interceding chapters. So basically, Joseph sent his brothers to go back to Canaan. Tell your dad to come back, or our father to come back. And this is where we're gonna dwell during the famine, so that you all can be protected in generations upon generations. But when Jacob died, Jacob wanted to go back to the land of Canaan to be buried there, and he ended up being buried there. And Joseph went back there. But on their way back, Joseph is having a conversation with his brothers, and we're going to pick up on that in chapter 50, verse 15. Brother David, can you read that for me, please?
Genesis 50, verse
15.
15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrong we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to begin. Hey, listen, I'm sorry. I started laughing in the middle of that because I'm like, y'all just gonna sit up there and just make this up. So he says, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed and treated you so badly. Now, please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. When the message came to him, Joseph wept.
Okay. And what verse did you stop at?
Stopped at 17.
Okay. Let's go to verse 18. So it says, and his brothers also went, and they fell down before his face, and they said, behold, we be thy servants. Verse 19, and Joseph said unto them, fear not, for I am in the place, for am I in the place of God, meaning can I judge you? Verse 20, but as for you, you thought it evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring it to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. So a lot of times, like I said, it's easy to hold those grudges, and we may not even agree with, most of the time it's understand God's plan. Because imagine this, if God had told Joseph verbatim exactly every single thing that he was going to have to deal with in order to bring his family out of a famine so that they would be protected, we would think to ourselves, I really don't want to go through all of that. But imagine everything that Joseph experienced, the good, the bad, the indifferent, the feelings of emotion, the willingness to not hold a grudge when it's easy to do so. Because sometimes you have brothers that you just want to, I'm sorry, you know, had to get back, and I'm joking.
I was Benjamin. I was the brother that stood up for
I'm
him.
joking. For the brethren listening online, I just had a moment. I just looked at my brother, and my childhood memories just came back. You know, sometimes they take your clothes, but nonetheless, what Joseph did was he forgave his brothers, and that was very key, because God obviously wouldn't have blessed him to that degree had he held a grudge against his brothers. But that's an amazing story that I don't want us to overlook. And it's a lot of chapters. I know we went through a lot of different verses there, but when you get an opportunity, Genesis chapter 37 through 50, you don't have to read every single verse of each chapter, but go through it, comb through it, and see how God dealt with Joseph, see how he orchestrated every single plan, every single step of the way, and see what sticks out to you. Because for me, chapter 40 stuck out to me when he was in prison and he told him, hey, look, don't forget about me. And 2 full years had gone by before the butler said, oh yeah, hold on, Pharaoh, there is this one guy. There is this one guy that we came across in prison that can probably interpret your dream. And then that's ultimately what led Joseph to being second in command and being able to protect his family from a great famine upon the land. And so I want us to think about how Joseph had the proper foundation of how to deal with people. Because he had the proper foundation and the right understanding, that placed him in a situation where he wasn't caught off guard or wasn't bitter about the plan. He knew that God was with him every single step of the way. And because of that, remember we said the third point was he bore much fruit. Yeah. Right? He bared a lot of fruit because he had the proper foundation. Now, I want to go on to another person in the Bible who had the right foundation. We saw with Joseph. The story of Daniel. I'm sorry, not this Daniel. I meant this Daniel. Okay, I'm sorry, not that. Daniel, that's all the same. I'm sorry. Not the first Daniel. We're gonna focus on this Daniel, okay? Now, this man Daniel, not to be confused with the one that's in front of you, he had the proper foundation as well. Because you'll notice when you look at Daniel, he had a lot of similarities to that of Joseph. All right, both were taken away from their native land, right? Sold into slavery, taken against their will. Both interpreted dreams, right? Both when they were finally placed in a position of authority, they still honored God. So there are a lot of similarities between Daniel and Joseph. So we're going to start with Daniel chapter 1. Let me go ahead. I'll start off with this. So verse 1, Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, which part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried in the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring forth certain children of Israel and the king's seed and of the princes. We're gonna drop down to verse 7. It says, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name Belshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and Mishael of Meshach, and Azariah of Abednego. Verse 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank, Therefore, he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse, like in the children which thou art of sort? Then shall you make me endanger my head to the king. Verse 11, then Daniel said to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days. Let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Verse 13, then let our countenances or our face be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this manner and proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fuller in flesh than all the children did who did eat the portion of the king's meat. So here we see Daniel in a situation just like Joseph, taken away to a faraway land and now forced to make some dietary decisions about how to eat. And he trusted God, knowing that, listen, I'm going to eat the right thing for 10 days. And at the end of those 10 days, we'll see who's in better condition. We'll see who's in a better situation, both physically and spiritually. And because Daniel had the right foundation and trusted in God, knowing that God was with him, even in a difficult situation. So they had trust in God, having the right foundation at the very beginning in a faraway land. So my question to you is, do you have trust in God right where you are? In the comfort of your own home, with your same set schedules, dealing with people from time to time, whoever they may be, in your family or place of employment or even in church. If they could have faith in a faraway land being held somewhere against their will, can you have faith right where you are? I think you can. Let's go over to Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6. And when you get there, say he's almost done. Daniel chapter 6, verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes who should be over the whole kingdom. And over these three presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king thought to set him over the whole realm. So he's being placed in a position of authority, just like Joseph was. Verse 4, then the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no fault against him. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. This is another commonality that I saw between Joseph and Daniel. He had some haters. There was a song I was thinking about when I was reading it. It's not a song fit for church, but it says, haters everywhere we go. Haters everywhere we go. They had haters, people that wanted to find fault with them, despite the fact that they had did nothing wrong. And sometimes you're going to have people that hate on you. The enemy will stir them up. Go bother this person. Go bother them. Say this to them. Try to get them off course. But I would encourage you to respond the same way Joseph did. I would encourage you to respond the same way Daniel did. Having the right foundation, not letting it throw them off, but continuing to stay the course. Knowing that God is with them all the way. Verse 5. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. They just didn't recognize who his God truly was. Then the presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto them, King Darius live forever. All the presidents of the kingdoms and governors and princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or any man for 30 days, except the king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. So instead of it being the presidents and the kings and the governors and counselors of that day, we call them maybe Congress, governors, men and women in positions of leadership and authority that try to place laws into place to prevent us from truly knowing who God is, to prevent us or throw us off course in our walk with God. And they knew that they couldn't do anything that was really going to get Daniel in trouble, except we got to put a law in place that he can't pray to that God that he always prays to. And we're going to put this law in place for 30 days. And you never know, brethren, the time may come when there may be new laws that are put into place. And the question is, what are you going to do? What am I going to do when that happens? Are we going to respond the way Daniel did? Let's continue to read on. Verse 8. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. Verse 10. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. So we see how Daniel wrought. We see how Daniel, how he's going, this is his response. He said, this is how I'm going to respond. I knew I liked this guy. I knew I liked him. I knew I liked him. So verse 11, it says, these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Daniel broke the law. He was found guilty. If someone had to find you guilty of being a Christian, would they find you guilty? If you were on trial for being a Christian, would you be found guilty or would you be let scot-free? Done. Are you going to bear fruit and continue, even in the face of adversity, to still obey God rather than man? Verse 12, then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Has thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or any man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, this is true according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which changes not. Verse 13, then answered they and said before the king that Daniel, which is of the children of captivity of Judah, regards not, O king, nor the decree which you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. So not only has he broke the law, but he breaks the law 3 times on a daily basis. Verse 14, then the king, when he heard these words, was sorely displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him of the same. So the king was like, man, you're right. I did sign this law into place, but I don't want to punish Daniel. I like Daniel. Something about Daniels. They're just likable. Even the king. Verse 15. Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is that no decree nor statute which the king establishes may be changed. So you can't change the law. So he's like, okay, that won't work. Let's see what else. Then 16. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. Verse 17. And a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting, neither with instruments nor music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O live forever. Verse 22, my God has sent an angel and has shut the lion's mouth, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me. And also before thee, O king, have I done no wrong. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no matter of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Do you believe in your God? The same one that shut the lion's mouth, the same one that was with Joseph when he was in the pit, the same one that gave him the ability to interpret dreams, the same one that was with David when he faced Goliath and said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Do you believe in the same God that was with Moses, that led the children of Israel out of Egypt? Do you believe in the same God that was with Paul that healed the sick? Do you believe in the same God that was that inspired Jesus Christ to help the disciples move forward and preach the gospel, even if it meant their lives would be lost? What about the God of Jonah who was with them even in the belly of the whale? We can go on and on and on again. And we see every single time God comes through. And the reason that Joseph and Daniel were able to be so successful, even in difficult situations where their lives were at stake, is because they had the right foundation. If they didn't have the right foundation, they would have lost their faith and probably lost their lives. Is your foundation sure, brethren? Is your foundation unshakable? Do you have the proper foundation? I want you to repeat after me. I have the proper foundation. All right, now I want you to say it like you truly believe it. I have the proper foundation. There you go. And if you're online, put it in the chat. And I want you to put some fire emojis behind it. And even throw in a 100 emoji so that we can know that it's truly the case. And we know that they had the right foundation, and so do we. Verse 24. And as we know, God always goes the extra mile, right? So it wasn't enough that he just saved Daniel out of the lion's den. Let's see what else happens. Verse 24. And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the lion's den. Them, and not only them, but who else? Their children and their wives, and the lions had their mastery of them, and break all their bones in pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the den. Then King Darius wrote unto all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever and ever, and his kingdom, that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. That's what God will do to those who oppose you when he is with you. He's not only going to deliver you out of a difficult situation, whether it be the pit or the lion's den. He's going to make those who put you there in the first place regret that they ever did. It will be enough if he did that where he just delivered us out. But he's going to do it for good measure. The same way he did King Hezekiah, when King Sennacherib ended up dying because they came against them. And the Assyrian army, and everybody was like, well, we can do all of these things. And they didn't come up against the one true God. They were mocking King Hezekiah and their army. And God said, I'll tell you what, for good measure, not only am I going to give them the victory, but King Sennacherib, you're going to die as well. And that's what a father does for his children. He protects them and he makes their paths straight. And so those who oppose you when God is on your side will regret the day that they even did that. Amen. Amen. We see the similarities, as I said. We have an agreement by President Obama. He believes that this is true also. They both had a solid foundation in their relationship with God. Both enjoyed the blessing of God because of their obedience. They were both taken into captivity. They both praised God when they were given positions of authority after they passed their tests. They both interpreted dreams for those in authority over them. And they both had haters that God even used for his plan. Today's takeaways, brethren. Sometimes people will hate on you, but that does not stop God's plan. We all have some type of hater, somebody that tries to get in the way and impede our progress, but that's not going to stop the plan of God. Genesis chapter 37, verse 4 says that Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other brothers. But guess what? It didn't matter. They sold him into slavery. It didn't matter. It didn't stop God's plan. One of the reasons I have so much faith in God is because of the sovereignty of God. He sees all and he knows all. He's not caught off guard. There was no secret meeting. There's nothing that happens in the universe without him knowing. And even if man tries to get in your way and stop you, it will not matter. The second takeaway, sometimes even when you're living righteously, things may not go well at times, but it is according to God's plan. Think about it. Joseph didn't do anything wrong by having the dream. Maybe it wasn't as wise to tell his brothers, even though they hated him. But guess what? He didn't do anything that got him put into slavery as it being his fault. He didn't do anything it wasn't his fault that he was thrown into prison when Potiphar's wife falsely accused him. Sometimes, even when you're living righteously, things may not go well, and that's okay. Romans chapter 8, verse 28, favorite Bible verse. All things work together for good to those who are called according to his purpose. The third takeaway, you will always come out on top with God by your side. Joseph told his brothers, listen, I forgive you, man. What the enemy meant for evil, God turned it around and used it for good. I'll always come out on top. As long as God is with me, I'm good. The fourth takeaway, forgive others whether you think they deserve it or not. You don't want to hinder your blessing by being unforgiving towards someone else. And notice I said when you think they deserve it, because sometimes we think, well, this person did this and they don't deserve it. And I've been there. I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. They did this to me. They did that to me. And God is saying, yep, and I forgave you. And that's exactly the same thing I expect you to do. And set up healthy boundaries if necessary. I'm not saying just fully dive right back in, depending on the nature of the situation, but don't be unforgiving toward them. Ask God to help you to forgive that person for something that they did that was hurtful towards you. And he will give you the strength to forgive. He will give you the ability to say, I'm not holding anything in my heart against you. So don't block your blessing by being unforgiving toward others. And because I'm in such a giving mood, I'm gonna give you guys a bonus tip. God can bless you no matter where you are. No matter where you are. He was in prison. Imagine that. And then was in prison 2 more years. He could have easily been like, after that first year, he could have easily said, you know what, man? I tried this God thing, man. I tried it. It didn't work. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be in here. Not knowing he had 1 more year. Think about that. You could have, because he was good up until that point. He could have easily been like, you know, I'm straight. Right? You running around the track. You ran 3 laps. You got one lap to go. You're like, man, I'm tired. I'm good. Nah, you almost there. What if he had given up? Then he never would have been in a position to interpret Pharaoh's dream. Then he never would have been put second in command, and then his family never would have been taken care of. I thank the Lord that he has not forgotten about me. Sometimes I may feel forgot, like, man, God, what are you doing? I thought this was supposed to happen by now. I thought that was supposed to happen. And God is saying, I see you. I haven't forgotten about you. I haven't forgotten about what you need. I know exactly where you are. I know exactly what's going on. I know exactly what you need. You're right on course. As long as you're continuing to be obedient to me, you're right on course. You're exactly where I need you to be. One of the reasons I love the game of chess is because you have to think 2 and 3 steps ahead. And that's how God is. He's thinking ahead every single time. He thinks ahead, and the enemy thinks or tries to deceive you into believing that God has forgotten about you, but he hasn't. It doesn't matter if you're in jail. It doesn't matter if you're in a certain neighborhood. It doesn't matter if you're in a certain career path. It doesn't matter what family you came from, where you're from, what language you speak, what culture you're accustomed to. No matter what the situation is, God has not forgotten about you. We can take comfort in that. Think about the billions of people that have lived and have passed on, and God is going to resurrect them. He hasn't forgotten. And that's the thing that gives me comfort. No matter where we are, God has us. And that's so important. Because it's easy to get bogged down with the things of life and to think that, God, you don't know what you're doing, what's going on. And God's like, nope, I'm right there. I see it. You're good. You're exactly where I need you to be. So, brethren, I want to encourage you as you move forward. not only the rest of this year, but as principles of applying throughout your daily lives, to remember that we should have a sure foundation, one that cannot be shaken, one that when we come up against obstacles, we'll be tried and will be tested, and things will be difficult at times. But if you have a sure foundation, you will make sure you're in a position to withstand the floods. You'll be able to withstand the oppositions and the attacks of the enemy. You'll be in a position where you can withstand no matter what you may go through. That's today's message. Any questions?
I have one.